Hey, welcome investors to the 40 Finance channel. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, that's the stock that we're talking about today. Full disclosure, I am an owner of TSM and have been for the last year or two, something like that. So this is a stock that I really like. But what we're seeing right now with TSM is essentially a flat line. Meanwhile, if you watch the news headlines, there's outstanding demand for chips across multiple industries. So what the heck is going on with TSM? We're going to look at where Taiwan Semiconductor stands today in terms of fundamentals. And as always, I'll take analyst estimates and my own insights to make a price prediction for TSM in 2022. Reminder as always that my stock picks and projections are just my opinion for your entertainment. But if you enjoy stock market analysis like this, going deep on stocks like Taiwan Semiconductor, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. Thank you everybody for all your support. So let's kick things off by talking about momentum for TSM stock. This is a 1-year chart here. And like so many others, you had a boom year last year, and semiconductors in particular saw demand for their products just skyrocket out of nowhere during the pandemic. And so you had a lot of interest and a lot of building revenues for TSM that were not expected on analyst charts, right? Around February of this year, we started to see, right, a decline in valuations as earnings and revenues settled down a little bit. Instead of doing plus 50%, we're seeing a lot more plus 20%. And God forbid, plus teens could be in there as well. And so what you really have here on this 1-year chart with TSM, it's just a time where the valuation has settled into what the company is doing. And it's not necessarily bad news. It's just that the prices for the whole stock market ran up high. And TSM now, in my opinion, is fully valued today at about $115 and has been for the last couple quarters. So here we are at 115, and the 50-day and the 200-day are getting awfully close together. And obviously, from a momentum standpoint, when 50-day drops under 200-day, if that were to happen, you certainly have some risk to the downside. We go to the bottom here from an RSI indicator. You've got a 44 right now. If you compare that back with the peak of the stock market, it was at 84. So general interest, aka momentum, whatever you want to call it with TSM, is sort of flatlining now, if not slightly down from typical interest in this stock. And what we're starting to hear the headlines in the news right now is that maybe the chip sector is starting to catch up with the demand. And when that happens, their margins typically go down just a little bit, because the more that the factories catch up, the more producers you have that are selling their wares to corporate America, and prices naturally take a little bit of a dip. Now, in TSM's case, they have an added moat, and that is basically being the most advanced chip foundry in the whole earth. Now, the competition, whether it's Intel or Samsung, there's plenty of people who are trying to catch up to TSM's foundry level to get into that sort of 5 nanometer production at scale. But for right now, TSM is at the top of the line in terms of technological efficiency. That's always going to give them pricing margin, both now and in the future. And the thing that's going on with Taiwan Semi too in the background is they are investing a ton of money into building new foundries, both over in Taiwan, and there are plans to build a foundry here in America, in Arizona. I'm not exactly sure what the timeline is for that. It takes a long time to build a foundry, but if I had to guess, you're probably looking at 2023, perhaps even beyond. But I can tell you the last update I read said that TSM's sort of corporate headquarters in Arizona is already being moved into, and so on and so forth. But then you have, of course, the construction side of the foundry. Now, the other concern with the price being flat right now is the tensions between USA, China, Taiwan's kind of stuck in the middle here. And so you kind of have an uncertain political environment. That's certainly not helping the momentum for TSM. There's nothing right now, I think, that should scare anyone, but you do have to pay attention. Hopefully, TSM will be expanding. They have plans for Germany, like I said, America, and they need to decentralize, I would say, from Taiwan to give maximum padding from some of the political risks that are out there. And finally, from a fundamental approach, the other reason the stock is flat right now, the reinvestment is taking away from some of the earnings per share. So last year's earnings per share were in the $7 range. This year, you're going to fall short of that and end up about $4, $4.25, something like that. So anytime the EPS declines, particularly year over year, you're going to see either flat or you're going to see the stock price go down. The good news is there's reason to believe that those numbers are going back up in the near future. All right, let's dig into price projections by looking at historical data to tell us what kind of range does TSM typically trade at? What is the valuation multiples? We know the stock market is running hot right now because there's not a ton of alternative investments. So we always have to keep our eye on history to kind of show us where have stocks in certain sectors traded at in the past, kind of protect us from the downside in case we do revert back to a so-called normal market. All right, if you're a longtime viewer, then you know my primary focus is forward PE. How do the earnings look in the years ahead? Trailing 12 months is nice, but we want to get a feel for where is the EPS going because the stock market is always looking ahead. So right now we have a forward PE of 29, very comparable to what you saw last year. And even in the end of 2019, you were sitting at 22.47. Now, the chip sector as a whole typically does not trade that high in, again, normal years. Now, a normal year would sort of insinuate that there's other investing options on the table, so maybe there's not as much money in the market. There's a lot of ways to look at it. But for the purposes of just historical knowledge, from 2015 to 2018, TSM traded at about a 15 to call it 18 multiple from a forward PE standpoint. So we'll keep that in mind. Most recently, though, it's been trading between 22 and 29. Then we look at price to sales, 12x on today's metrics. We go back to that 15 to 18 range. Looks like you're about a 5 or 6 on the price to sales. And here recently, if you want to do sort of a 2.5-year average, you're probably in the neighborhood of 10 or 11x price to sales for your average multiple. All right, let's scroll down and just take a quick look at the income and balance sheet. Revenue, look at this number, $1.5 trillion revenue over the last 12 months. Phenomenal company, huge company, total cash, almost $1 trillion in the bank. I mean, almost, but how about $870 billion cash in the bank? They do have a big debt load for some people, right? $400 billion. But if you just eyeball it and figure that you've got double the cash than your debt load, and you've got $1.5 trillion coming through the pipeline. On the short side of things, short percentage of shares outstanding, not even 1%. So not a lot of people betting against TSM, certainly not right now. All right, so just to put TSM in perspective with other chip companies, we do evaluation across the board. Non-GAAP PE right now, fiscal year 1, 29 for TSM, Nvidia's at 50, Intel's at 11, Broadcom is at 17.5, Texas Instruments 23x, Qualcomm 17x. So TSM, outside of Nvidia, arguably those two by themselves are the most technologically advanced in the space, but they both are also running higher than other options out there. So you have to choose in the chip sector, how much do you value the technological advantages that TSM and Nvidia have versus some other stocks that maybe perhaps are a little bit cheaper? For me personally, I chose TSM because it makes the most advanced chips for the most advanced partners. You've got Apple in there, you've got AMD, you've got auto chips in there. So this is a company that works with the best of the best, and they produce the best of the best. And in my opinion, that's worth a premium. But I did want to call out that this is not the cheapest chip stock that you'll find out there. All right, let's take a look at what analysts are projecting for Taiwan Semi and see if we can make a price projection here. Taiwan Semi runs on sort of a standard fiscal calendar, so we are getting closer to the end of fiscal 2021 for them, and they will report on that in January of 2022. And at that time, assuming we don't have any world chaos going on like we did last year, then they will make their projection in terms of EPS and in terms of sales for fiscal year 2022. And that's when the stock will start changing over to a forward look into fiscal year 2022. Okay, so we use Seeking Alpha here, and we've got our fiscal period ending on December of 2021. Let me adjust this a little bit. Current consensus estimate is 398, okay? You see the year-over-year growth of minus 44%. That's one of the reasons that this stock is flat. So last year, $7.16, likely due to a one-time event, and then that drops down to $3.98 this year, which, by the way, is still way better than they did in 2019. But you see how that would affect the fundamentals. I mean, it's a simple math equation, right? You hit 716 on your EPS, you divide it by the share price, right? Then you have your PE ratio. So when this number goes down, your PE ratio goes up, it puts pressure on your stock price from a fundamental perspective. Now, everybody who invests in this stock already knows that that's the case. So to be honest, that's probably priced into our flatness already. But today we've got 398 for our consensus. That brings your forward PE currently to 29. I'm most interested in December of 2022, right? Because I want to make a projection for January of 2022. So that's about what people will be looking at. The consensus right now is 469. That's a year-over-year growth of 17.81%. So like I said, heading into next year, we start to get the growth back on track from an EPS standpoint. That puts your forward PE at 24.75, and you can see the range, 429 to 501. I'm going to be going with 501, or actually more like 5, because I believe TSM will outperform. Now, looking at the revenue side, there is some sort of miscalculation here on forward price to sales for TSM, and I'm not sure what it is, but we'll assume the revenue estimates are correct. I did double check these numbers, and they are correct as far as what analysts are expecting. So $56 billion, revenue growth of 18.22% year over year. And the big thing we're looking at here is we want to make sure that revenue is indeed growing. And in TSM's case, an important criteria for me is I want to invest in companies ideally that have a double-digit revenue growth outlook. And you see, let's see, through December of 2023, we've got, 21 analysts that are willing to project out that far. That's probably a stretch, to be honest with you. But what I do like here is plus 15% growth in revenue over the next 3 years, at least with the information we know today. All right, taking a look at TipRanks here. It's been a little while since TSM's earnings call back in like July 15. And because TSM is listed on the USA exchange, but is also available on the Hong Kong exchange, you don't get a lot of coverage here in TipRanks. In fact, the last updates were last month and 2 months ago, etc. The last person to come in was 105, and then you had an Argus one 60 days ago about 150. What I would say here, though, is you just have a lack of updated information. But I always share the TipRanks price target, so I wanted to stay informed on that. All right, so let's take a look at my price projection for Taiwan Semiconductor. TSM today is August 12th. Price is 115. Current forward PE is 29. 21, this fiscal year's analyst EPS projection, about $4, $3.97. Talked about the fiscal year, it's a normal one. So my projections, and this is for post Q4, that'll come in January of 2022 at some point, usually near the end of the month. I think the chip sector will lose a little bit of steam after being on fire for 18 months. So I'm going to say forward P comes down to about 25. However, my EPS projection, I'm going to go higher than the consensus. Consensus was at 465, something like that. I'm going to say by January, we're going to have more information that pushes that projection for fiscal year 2022 all the way up to $5. So when you take 25, so multiple going down, EPS going up, 25 times 5, I'm putting a price target of 125 by January, by the end of January, I should say, of 2022. Don't forget, with TSM, you get an annual dividend right in the neighborhood of $1.78. All right, so Taiwan Semiconductor, I see it hitting about 125 by the end of January. Keep in mind, we'll have a lot of stock market fluctuations in between there. So while it's only about an 8 or 9% gain across the next 4 months, keep in mind that you do get a dividend, and keep in mind that there'll be some stock market fluctuations. You might see this one get to 100, maybe even under 100 when we talk about some of that negative momentum where the 50-day was inching closer to the 200-day. So my advice, as always, really, is just to pick your spots and maybe average in your position. And for this one, I mean, you're looking at a 3 to 5 year hold easy if you want to make the most out of your investments. The real attraction with a stock like this, obviously, is a gigantic company that continues to grow. You shouldn't fret too much over a stock like this. We do have some geopolitical risks, though, right now, so you have to watch that. But you take that out of the equation, this company's just printing money. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this look at Taiwan Semiconductor. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed the content. We'll see you on the next video.